Welcome. Tonight we'll be discussing the dark truth about the Vietnam War. Viewer discretion is advised. This video contains disturbing historical content, graphic descriptions of violence, and the psychological horrors of war. All events are based on true accounts from the Vietnam War. They said it was a mission to stop communism, but in the jungle, nothing was black and white, only blood and green. They called it the Good Fight. The United States, the most powerful military force on earth, stepped into a country it barely understood and never came out the same. This is not a tale of glory. This is not about heroes. This is a story of blood, of shadows, of a jungle that swallows you whole. This is Vietnam. The Marines landed in the early morning, humidity thick like oil. Eyes wide, hands shaking, the Viet Cong were there, unseen, unheard, until it was too late. Booby traps laced the forest floor. Bamboo spikes coated in feces pierced boots and bone. The screams echoed in that goddamn jungle like ghosts. Real quote from US soldier, "Saw Mikey lose his leg to a punji pit today. He didn't scream at first. He just looked at it. Then he started laughing. That was worse than the screaming." Operation Starlight was a success, they said. 200 Viet Cong dead. 45 Marines never made it home. Success. The jungle had no front, no safe zone, no way to tell friend from foe. The enemy wore no uniform. The enemy was sometimes a child, or a farmer, or an old woman walking past a road mine just moments before it exploded. Villages burned, men shot in panic, whole families buried in ash and blood because someone thought they saw movement in the tree line. Some soldiers were sent into the earth itself, the tunnel rats. Small men, usually under 5 feet 6 inches, tasked with crawling into pitch-black tunnels beneath the jungle. No room to turn around, armed with just a flashlight and a pistol. Down there, you didn't know if a tripwire would blow your face off, or if a Viet Cong soldier would be waiting in the dark with a knife. Here's a quote from a US tunnel rat. "I crawled through blood once, still warm. The guy before me never made it out." The tunnels were homes, armories, hospitals, execution chambers. Some men came back up from those tunnels. Different. Others never came back up at all. To defeat the jungle, America set it on fire. Napalm, sticky, burning death that clung to flesh and wouldn't stop burning. Agent Orange, a chemical defoliant meant to kill plants, but it didn't stop there. It seeped into the water, into the soil, into the wombs of mothers. Birth defects, cancer, mutations. A silent legacy that still haunts Vietnam today. The horrors of this war are beyond comprehension. The jungle was not just physical, it was mental. Soldiers stopped sleeping. Paranoia consumed them. They saw things that weren't there, heard voices in the trees, started shooting at shadows, and sometimes their own men. The term shell shock didn't cover it. This was something else, something deeper, a madness that spread like rot. In Vietnam, death didn't just come for your body, it came for your soul. There were villages the world forgot, quiet places where children played in dirt roads, where farmers tilled rice fields under the sun. And then one day, they disappeared. Let me tell you about the My Lai massacre. It was supposed to be a search and destroy mission. Charlie Company had orders to eliminate Viet Cong forces in the hamlet of My Lai. But they didn't find any soldiers. They found civilians, women, children, the elderly. And they opened fire anyway. Infants were thrown into ditches. Elderly women were beaten and raped before being shot. Over 500 unarmed civilians died. Not by accident, by command. Helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson, real quote. "I threatened to open fire on my own men if they didn't stop the killing. Only one man, Lieutenant William Calley, was convicted. He served 3.5 years under house arrest. That's it. They say the land remembers, that in places like My Lai, the wind carries the screams of those who died." Soldiers would later report nightmares, unshakable guilt, visions of blood-soaked women standing silently in the tree line. Some never left Vietnam, not because they died, but because part of them stayed behind. A quote from a Vietnam veteran: "I still smell it. 40 years later, the smoke, the blood, the silence." While My Lai became infamous, others were hidden in shadows. Tiger Force, an elite US Army unit deployed in the Central Highlands. What they did over 7 months was far worse: torture, scalping, execution of prisoners, cutting off ears and wearing them as trophies. Reporter voice: "One soldier confessed to killing so many people, he lost count. It wasn't just war, it was cruelty. Dehumanization on a scale the public never truly saw. No one was ever prosecuted." Explosions. 1,000 invisible footsteps and not a single body in sight. Soldier's voice hushed. "I never saw them, only their eyes, glowing in the dark." Captured American pilots were sent to Hoa Lo prison, sarcastically nicknamed the Hanoi Hilton. There they were beaten, starved, tied in painful stress positions for days. Some were placed in tiny cages too small to stand. Others were kept in darkness for weeks. John McCain, real, account: "I lost 50 pounds. Couldn't lift my arms. They kept telling me, just say the war was wrong. Just say America is evil." Some gave in. Others broke silently. In Vietnam, horror was not just a moment. It was a constant, a fog that crept into your mind and never left. The jungle didn't take sides. It didn't care about communism or capitalism. It simply devoured. In Vietnam, men were not just killed. They were consumed by rot, by madness, by each other. In the fog of war, the deadliest enemy was often your own side. Over 8,000 American troops died from friendly fire during the Vietnam War. Helicopter gunships misidentified targets. Artillery rained down on Allied outposts. Coordinates were misread. Entire units were bombed by their own planes. Another quote from a US soldier: "We called in support, and they hit us." The radio guy just kept screaming, "Wrong grid, wrong grid." But it was too late. Bullets don't care who pulled the trigger. By 1969, morale among US troops had shattered. Some soldiers turned on their own officers. Fragging. The term used when enlisted men murdered their commanders, usually by tossing grenades into their tents. Why? Sometimes it was rage, sometimes fear, sometimes the officers pushed them too hard, sent them into suicidal missions. Army report, quote, "There were over 900 reported fragging incidents between 1969 and 1972. Many were never solved. Leadership broke, trust dissolved, the war was turning inward. The US trained and armed the Montagnards, indigenous hill tribes, to fight the Viet Cong. They fought with loyalty, with courage. And then they were abandoned. Many were left to be slaughtered when the US pulled out. Others were hunted down by the North Vietnamese and branded as traitors." Montagnard elder voice: "We fought for them. We died for them. Then they left us behind." It wasn't always bullets that killed. The jungle itself was a predator. Malaria swept through units like wildfire. Trenchfoot and jungle rot turned flesh to mush. Leeches slipped into boots and helmets, sucking blood silently. US medic, quote, "We lost more men to disease and infection than enemy fire some weeks. They'd rot alive, screaming for us to cut it off. And always, the insects, biting, buzzing, crawling under skin. The jungle was never quiet, never still. The isolation drove some men insane. Entire squads reported seeing phantoms in the trees, hearing whispers, lights that danced and then vanished, children with no eyes, women standing perfectly still for hours, even in gunfire." A quote from a US soldier. "He walked off one night, said he heard his mother calling from the river. We found his body 2 days later, hanging upside down from a tree. No footprints, just him, drained." Vietnam wasn't just a war, it was a descent. A slow, boiling madness that took everything human and left something hollow. The jungle eats its own, and it never stops chewing. When bullets weren't flying, another war was brewing. A war of escape, of chemicals, of altered minds. It started small. A joint passed between foxholes, a sip of beer, a sleeping pill to drown out the screams. But by 1971, over 60% of American troops in Vietnam were using drugs. The heroin was nearly pure, 95%, and cheap. Smuggled in from the Golden Triangle, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand, it flowed into US bases with ease. Some say it was ignored, others say it was supplied. Needles became more common than bullets. A quote from a US soldier: "We'd shoot up in the morning before patrol, sometimes during. It made the jungle feel like a dream, but dreams turn into nightmares. Overdoses became routine. Men were found dead, purple-lipped and stiff, still holding their rifles. LSD was passed around like candy. Speed helped soldiers stay awake for days. Downers numbed them when they returned to base. Some soldiers claimed the drugs made them see things that weren't supposed to be there." Journal entry US soldier: "I saw a VC standing in the tree line. Shot him 5 times. Turned out it was a scarecrow with no head. Or maybe, I imagined the whole thing. The drug problem wasn't just in the trenches." Entire platoons were led by officers high on codeine, amphetamines, or heroin. Combat readiness collapsed. Orders were ignored. Mutiny spread in whispers and side glances. Army CID report, quote, "The lines between soldier and addict blurred. Discipline disintegrated. It became impossible to tell who was fighting who. The black market exploded. Drugs, weapons, even military intelligence. Some South Vietnamese generals grew rich. Some American officers looked the other way. And in the clubs of Saigon, girls as young as 12 were sold for money, drugs, or information. It wasn't just a war of bullets, it was a war of moral collapse. When these men returned to America, they didn't come back whole. They came back addicts, haunted, some still hearing jungle sounds in the silence of their bedrooms. Veteran voice, bitter. "They called us junkies. Baby killers. They spit on us at the airport. They had no idea what we left behind, or what followed us back. PTSD wasn't understood. Addiction wasn't treated. So they disappeared into back alleys, into prisons, into graves, when the jungle couldn't kill them. The drugs finished the job. It was a slow collapse. And then, it happened all at once. Saigon, once the seat of US power in South Vietnam, became a drowning city, flooded with fear, drenched in betrayal. April 1975. The Americans were leaving. The last helicopters scrambled from the roof of the US Embassy. Thousands were left behind. South Vietnamese allies, interpreters, government workers, even orphans. Ambassador Martin voiceover. We could not take them all. God help them. We could not take them all. Desperate parents lifted their children over the walls. Some clung to landing skids, falling to their deaths. The last Marine out radioed one word. Tiger. Out. Then the door shut. As North Vietnamese tanks rolled into Saigon, the silence was deafening. Then came the gunfire, the arrests, the disappearances. Eyewitness voice shaken. People were lined up in the street. Some were taken away with bags over their heads. Others were just shot. Entire South Vietnamese military units vanished overnight. Libraries were burned, books banned, re-education camps filled. Some chose death over dishonor. South Vietnamese generals shot themselves in their offices. Officers gathered their families and overdosed together. Some lit themselves on fire in front of government buildings. Witness account. We walked past bodies in suits and medals, still smoking. Eyes wide open, mouths frozen mid-scream. Others surrendered, but there were no promises, only silence and chains. Re-education camps spread across Vietnam like a plague. They weren't schools, they were prisons. Forced labor, torture, brainwashing. Men were made to write confessions for crimes they didn't commit until they believed them. Camp survivor voice. We dug our own graves every morning, just in case. Sometimes they made us lie in them to think about the future. Many never came out. Back in the US, the headlines faded. The war was over. People wanted to forget. But the dead didn't care. Veteran voice, angry. They told us to shut up, to move on, but the jungle came home with us. And in Vietnam, the darkness only deepened. When Saigon fell, it wasn't just a city. It was an empire of illusions collapsing in smoke. The war ended, but the horror didn't. For Vietnam, the land was scorched, the rivers poisoned, the people broken. For America, it was a wound that never healed. Agent Orange had seeped into the roots of the earth. It didn't just kill trees, it mutated the future. Tens of thousands of Vietnamese children were born with twisted limbs, missing eyes, exposed brains. Quote from a doctor. We see conditions here that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Children born inside out. Children who scream every hour they're alive. And the forests never returned. Even in peace, the jungle remained a predator. Unexploded ordnance, tens of millions of bombs, landmines, and booby traps still litter Vietnam's countryside. Children lost limbs playing in fields. Farmers were blown apart ploughing their land. Eyewitness quote, "There are villages where every family is missing someone, not from war, from what war left behind." After the fall of Saigon, millions fled. They became known as the boat people. Men, women, and children packed onto tiny rafts, drifting across the South China Sea. Many were never seen again. Storms swallowed them. Pirates boarded them. Some ran out of food and turned on each other. Survivor quote, "My sister drank seawater. Then she started screaming. Then she died. We had to push her body off the raft." For those who survived, refugee camps offered a new life, or something like it. Back in America, the returning veterans found no parades, no welcome, just silence. Some were spit on. Others were denied jobs. Most were told to forget. Nobody can justify sending our youth there. America will never be forgiven. Veteran quote. We went from jungle to sidewalk overnight. Nobody cared if we made it out. PTSD wasn't a diagnosis, it was a stigma. Many turned to alcohol, to heroin, to the trigger. Suicide rates among Vietnam vets skyrocketed. Some say more soldiers died after the war than during it. Laos was bombed into oblivion. More bombs dropped there than all of World War II combined. Cambodia became a graveyard. The Khmer Rouge rose in the power vacuum, a communist regime that murdered nearly 2 million of its own people. Vietnam didn't stop the bleeding. It opened the floodgates. The war ended in 1975. But the dying continued. The ghosts multiplied. And the jungle never really let go. In war, soldiers die. That is expected. But in Vietnam, some didn't just die. They vanished. Entire patrols that walked into the jungle and were never seen again. No blood, no bodies, no signs of struggle, only footprints. That stopped mid-step. Nitten City, Firebase Ripcord, a 6-man recon team, call sign Patrol 13, was sent to monitor enemy movement in Thua Tien province. They radioed in once. Then, silence. 3 rescue teams were sent. Only one returned. Their commander had no memory of what happened. His men were missing their dog tags, and their faces had been mutilated post-mortem. Rescue team members quote, "We found the last guy in a tree, 40 feet up, like he'd been dropped there, not climbed." The Pentagon buried the report. Soldiers called it the Whispering Zone, a stretch of jungle where compasses spun in circles and radios crackled with static and voices. Not Vietnamese, not American, something else. Soldier voice. We heard children laughing, but there were no kids. Then one of the guys walked off into the trees, said he saw his brother, never came back. Locals refused to enter the area, called it cursed, said it belonged to the old ghosts. Rumours spread of an American black site deep in Laos, a facility used for psychological warfare experiments, mind control, sensory deprivation, hallucinogenic drugs. They called it Black Site Delta. Officially, it never existed. Unofficially, satellite images once showed structures deep in uncharted jungle. Then, they disappeared. Defector quote, "They tried to weaponize fear, injected captured VC with LSD and left them in the dark for weeks. Some started speaking in dead languages. One chewed off his own fingers. The site was reportedly abandoned after the staff began suffering shared hallucinations. Or so the story goes. On several occasions, American troops reported contact with unknown Allied units, soldiers in old World War II-style fatigues, speaking perfect English, who disappeared the next day. Eyewitness. They said they were from Echo Company, 3rd Battalion, but Echo Company was wiped out 2 years earlier. Some believed these were ghost units. Others believed they were Black Ops teams that weren't on any records. Men trained to be invisible, disposable, denied. Whatever they weren't there the next day. Many veterans report the same feeling. Being watched. Not by the enemy, by the jungle itself. Veteran quote, "Sometimes it felt like the trees were leaning in, like the whole damn forest was breathing." Some believed it was the trauma, the constant fear. Others believed something ancient lived in that green hell. Local tribes whispered of forest spirits, guardians of the dead, and sometimes they took the living. Some were lost to bullets, others to something much darker. War ends. At least, that's what they told us. In 1973, Operation Homecoming brought 591 American prisoners of war back from Vietnam. Tearful reunions, national pride, a ribbon tied on a bloody war. Some were never meant to come home. Thousands were declared missing in action during the war. Men seen captured, heard screaming over the radio, documented by fellow soldiers. And yet, only a fraction returned. Military investigator voice. There were reports, satellite photos, even live radio calls long after the war ended, but they were dismissed. Buried. Intelligence reports pointed to hidden prison camps in Laos and North Vietnam. Remote, impenetrable. Some spotted by aerial surveillance. Strange clearings, movement, flickers of life. In one satellite image, large white rocks were arranged to form the letters USA, a distress signal. The photo was taken in 1981. Quote from an ex-CIA officer: "We had the proof, but no one wanted the political fallout, so they said it wasn't credible. The men were there, and they were left." Defectors from Vietnam and Laos later told of American prisoners held years after 1975. Some had gone feral, others tried to escape, only to be hunted down and killed. The war never truly ended, because some men never left. Thank you for tuning in to Raw Historian. Like and subscribe for more. Thank you.